The first thing Veldora did when the ardent wake entered its atmosphere was try to kill Rail Dern. It did not use weapons. It used the sky. The plateau's upper wind layer hit the ship sideways like a wall made of sound. Rail had 3 seconds of warning from Dovin before the port engine tore off and became a comet heading northwest. Then the ship rolled, and the ground came up fast, and Rail had just enough time to pull the crash harness tight before the ardent wake decided it was done being a ship and became a very long scar across a very old plateau. He was alive at the end of it. That surprised him less than it probably should have. He sat still for a moment in the wreckage. The hull had crumpled around him like a fist made of metal, but the core frame had held. There was smoke, but not fire. There was blood on his hand from somewhere, but it was slow and polite about it. Outside, through the cracked viewport, Veldora looked at him without any expression at all. Purple-gray stone as far as he could see. Low twisted trees with silver bark. A sky the color of an old bruise, lit from somewhere behind the clouds. Systems, Rail said. Gone, Dovin said from his wrist. The AI's voice was flat and calm in the way that meant it was working hard not to be alarmed. Navigation, propulsion, communications array, all gone. Emergency beacon is functioning, but I would not count on it reaching anything useful. The magnetic interference on this plateau is significant. Life support. You have your lungs. The atmosphere here is breathable, slightly low on oxygen, but not dangerously so. You will feel like you ran a short flight of stairs for the first few days. Rail looked at the wreckage around him. Most of his survey equipment was destroyed. The geological probes, the long-range scanner, the sample cases, all of it bent or shattered. He found his pack, which had survived wedged under the secondary console. Emergency rations, a thermal blanket, a hand torch, a field knife, and in the inner chest pocket of his jacket, where he always kept it, the compass. He took it out, a small brass disc, worn smooth by decades of hands. The glass face was not cracked, which was a small miracle. Inside, the needle spun freely, confused by whatever the plateau was doing to the local magnetic field. It did not settle. It had not settled reliably since he crossed into the Vethian Reach 6 weeks ago. That was fine. He was not carrying it for navigation. He clipped it to the outside of his jacket and started taking stock. Dovin gave him a quiet rundown while he worked. The ardent wake had come down roughly 4 kilometers inside the boundary of what the Vethian Conclave had filed as sacred ground, the plateau of Veldora, closed to outsiders under the terms of the trade charter he had technically been operating within. He had not intended to crash here. The Conclave was unlikely to care about that distinction. Patrol response time? Rail asked. Unknown. The Conclave keeps its internal schedules private. It could be hours. It could be days. And our people. Admiral Funwald's fleet is holding position at the edge of the Reach. They will have detected the crash, but I cannot reach them from here. They will know we went down. They will not know we are alive. Rail nodded and kept working. He cleared a useful amount of debris and found a secondary power cell that was not completely dead. He handed it to Dovin, who absorbed it quietly and said thank you in the dry way that meant he was genuinely grateful. The light outside was shifting. On Veldora, the cloud cover moved fast, and what passed for afternoon here was already becoming what passed for early evening. Rail decided not to sleep in the wreck. It was too visible, too exposed, and the metal would make noise all night as it cooled. He gathered what he could carry, took one last look at the ruined ship, and walked out onto the plateau. The air was cold and had a mineral smell to it, like the inside of a cave that had never seen water. The stone under his boots was uneven and covered in patches of something between moss and crystal that crunched quietly as he walked. He found a shallow overhang about 200 meters from the crash site and decided it was good enough. He was setting up the thermal blanket when he felt it. Not a sound, not a movement, just the feeling of being looked at by something that was deciding something. Rail did not freeze. He finished what he was doing, then slowly and casually turned around. There was nothing there. Stone. Twisted trees. The darkening sky. He looked at the compass out of habit. The needle, which had been spinning uselessly for hours, had stopped. It was pointing northeast. He looked northeast. The trees were thicker that way. Darker. Dovin, he said quietly. I see it too, Dovin said. Thermal signature. Large. Roughly 30 meters into the trees. It has been stationary for about 4 minutes. Big. Very. Rail sat down on a flat piece of stone and opened his rations. He ate slowly, without looking at the trees. He did not ignore them either. He simply did not perform fear, because he did not feel very much of it, and performing things he did not feel had always struck him as a waste of energy. The presence in the trees watched him eat. Then it was gone. He knew it was gone before Dovin confirmed it, because the compass needle started spinning again the moment it left. He looked at the small brass disc in the dim light. Useless, as usual, spinning freely, pointing at nothing. He closed his hand around it. Not tight, just holding it the way you hold something that used to belong to someone you will not see again. He slept. In the morning, the compass was gone. He knew immediately. He always knew where it was. He sat up and checked the clip on his jacket and found it open, the way it would be if something with very careful claws had worked it loose without waking him. He stood up and looked at the ground. Around the overhang, in the fine pale dust at the edge of the stone, there were prints. Each one was about the size of a large dinner plate. Foretoed, deep at the front, lighter at the heel. Something that moved quietly for its size. Rail followed the direction they were heading with his eyes. Northeast. You want my assessment? Dovin asked. Sure. Following those tracks is the statistically worst option you have. Rail picked up his pack. What's the second worst? Waiting here for a Vethian patrol to find you beside a crashed ship on sacred ground. Right, Rail said. He started walking northeast. So we're agreed. Dovin said nothing for a moment. Then, you could at least look less pleased about it. Rail did not answer. He was looking at the tracks, reading the weight distribution, the stride length, the way the prints deepened at the toe when the terrain sloped. Whatever had taken his compass was large, and it was not moving slowly. He was not fast. He knew that. He was not particularly strong, or impressive to look at, or equipped with anything more useful than a field knife and a pack of dried food. But he had walked across worse ground than this for reasons that mattered less. He walked. She had expected him to run. Sarah had taken things from creatures before. Food, warmth, objects that caught her eye, and the response was always the same. Panic, noise, a frantic scrambling in the wrong direction. It was one of the reliable things about smaller creatures. They ran when the larger thing took something from them. Because running was logical, because running was survival, because any animal with enough brain to feel loss understood immediately that if it had already lost something to you, staying close was not a wise idea. The human sat down and ate instead. She watched him from the trees, and she thought she had misread the situation. She pulled the small metal disc from where she had tucked it against her side and looked at it again. It was still doing nothing. Just a spinning needle inside a glass face, inside a brass ring, warm from where she had pressed it against her scales. She had felt it the night before when the human pulled it out and held it, and something about the way he held it had made her stop. It was not the motion. It was the stillness of it. The way he went completely quiet around it. She had seen that kind of stillness before, in her own people, in the moments before ceremony. It was not the stillness of someone checking a tool. It was something else. She had taken it to understand it better. That was what she told herself. Now he was following her tracks, and she did not know what to do about that. She moved deeper into the trees, northeast, uphill toward the high spine of the plateau where the rock rose in broken columns, and she knew every shadow by name. The human's trail behind her was easy to hear, boots on stone, the occasional scrape, the quiet voice of whatever he wore on his wrist. He was not trying to be silent. He was just walking, the way something walks when it has decided it is going somewhere. She stopped at the top of the ridge and looked back. He was still there, smaller from this distance, just a dark shape against the pale plateau, but moving steadily, reading something from the ground. He stopped, crouched, looked at the stone for several seconds, then stood and adjusted his direction by a few degrees to the left, toward the gap in the ridge that she had, in fact, used. He had read her tracks correctly. This bothered her in a way she was not sure how to name. Sarah was not young by any useful measure. She had lived long enough to see 3 Conclave leaders rise and fall, long enough to remember when the first human ships appeared at the edge of the reach like bright, noisy insects, and every elder had assumed they would either leave or be dealt with quickly. They had not left. They had not been easy to deal with. They had simply kept coming, smiling their flat-faced smiles, and learning things, and going away, and coming back having learned more. She had never been this close to one before. She decided to stop letting him follow her and went back. She did not take a long path. She went directly, fast, and came at him from above, dropping from the ridge face to land between him and the gap in the rock. The impact sent a crack through the stone that echoed across the plateau. She drew herself up to her full height and spread her neck frill. The human stopped walking. He looked up at her. He was so much smaller up close. She had known that intellectually, but seeing it plainly, the difference in scale, the soft face, the complete absence of anything that could reasonably be called armor, made something in her chest feel uncertain in a way she did not like. He did not run. He did not raise the small knife at his belt. He did not make the noise that prey things made. He looked at her for a few seconds, and then he said something in a language she did not speak. But Dovin, the voice on his wrist, translated it into trade standard a half-second later. I just want my compass back. Sara stared at him. The small brass disc, Rael added, in case she had misunderstood. She had not misunderstood. She held it out so he could see it and watched his face. Something moved through his expression. Relief, she thought, that it was not broken. Then he looked back at her face and waited. What does it do? She said. Her trade standard was heavily accented but functional. She had learned it years ago in the quiet way she learned most things, without telling anyone she was doing it. It's a compass, he said. What does it do? He looked at her steadily. It tells you which direction is north. Magnetic north. It follows the planet's magnetic field. It is not following anything, she said. The needle spins. The field here is disrupted. It doesn't work on Veldora. It barely works anywhere in the reach. He said this without frustration, just as information. It doesn't work. I still carry it. Sara looked at the small disc. A device that did not function, carried anyway, worth enough to be followed across the sacred plateau of Veldora by a creature with no armor and a knife the size of her smallest claw. She did not give it back. You will come with me, she said. Are you going to kill me? She considered telling him yes, because it would be simpler. Not today, she said. He looked at her for a moment. Then he hitched his pack up slightly and said, lead the way. She turned and walked. He followed. Not because she had threatened him. She had, technically, but it was already clear that was not what was moving him. He followed the way he had been moving since she first saw him, like something that had decided where it was going and was simply continuing to go there. They walked for an hour without speaking. He kept pace behind her, which was harder than it looked over the uneven plateau stone, and he managed it without complaint. Once he stumbled and caught himself, and Dovin said something quiet on his wrist, and Rael said, I'm fine, stop counting, which meant nothing to her, but had a familiar tone. The tone of someone telling a worried voice that it was worrying unnecessarily. Lura was waiting at the cave. Sara's niece had the grace to look surprised, at least. She was young enough that her scales were still more dark blue than iron gray, and she was holding a set of survey papers that she immediately tried to look casual about. Her eyes went to the human behind Sara and went very wide. Aunt, she said. Go inside, Sara said. Is that a... Go inside. Lura went inside, but she left the cave entrance open in a way that was entirely deliberate. Sara pointed Rael to a flat stone near the entrance. He sat. He took out his rations and offered her one without any apparent irony. She looked at the small packet in his hand. It was the size of something she might eat as an afterthought between meals. No, she said. Your call. He opened it and ate it. Then he looked at the sky, which was going dark again in the fast way Veldora's sky did, and he said, What's your name? She almost did not answer, but something about the question, the plainness of it, the lack of strategy, made her say it. Sara. Rael, he said. He held up his wrist. This is Dovin. I know what an AI is, she said. Good, Dovin said pleasantly. That saves time. Sara looked at the compass in her hand again. The needle was still spinning. She pressed her claw gently against the glass and felt the faint vibration of the mechanism inside. A thing built with great care to do something it could not do here. She went inside the cave without giving it back. She heard him settle against the stone outside, unhurried, and say to Dovin in a low voice, She's going to keep it tonight. Probably, Dovin said. That's fine, Rael said. She hasn't left. In the cave, Lura looked at her aunt with an expression that had too many questions in it to choose just one. Sarah set the compass down on a ledge and stared at it. It spun and pointed at nothing. The second day on the plateau began with Lyra. She came out of the cave before Sarah was awake, which said something about how curious she was and how little she feared her aunt finding out. She sat down on a rock across from Rael with her tail tucked around her feet and her eyes open wide and said, in trade standard that was cleaner and faster than Sarah's, "What is it like on Earth?" Rael looked up from where he had been studying the rock face with no particular purpose other than that it was in front of him, and he was a surveyor by trade and old habits ran deep. He considered the question. "There isn't one anymore," he said. "Not the way you mean." Lyra's frills shifted in the way Sarah's did when she was processing something unexpected. "What happened to it?" "We happened to it," he said, without bitterness. "A long time ago, before we got better at things. The atmosphere went wrong. The oceans swallowed some of it. People moved out to the colony worlds and kept going from there." He paused. "There are still parts of it that are livable. People go back. But it's not home anymore. Home is wherever we've put down enough years." Lyra was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You came from a dead world." "We came from a world we damaged and had to leave behind," Rael said. "We don't call it dead. That would be easier than it deserves." Sarah appeared in the cave entrance. She had heard most of it, Rael suspected, because she did not look surprised by any of it. She looked at Lyra with the mild disapproval of someone who expected exactly this, and still found it slightly inconvenient. Lyra did not move. She pointed at the compass, which Sarah was carrying again, turned between two claws. He was going to explain what it is. "I already know what it is," Sarah said. "You know what it does?" Rael said. "That's different." Sarah sat down across from him with the deliberate weight of something that was choosing to lower itself rather than being lowered. She placed the compass on the stone between them, then explained the difference. Rael picked it up. He held it the way he always held it, flat on his palm, not pressing it. "My grandfather carried this on a ship. A water ship, not a spaceship. He was a sailor on the Pacific, which was an ocean on Earth. He used this to know which way he was going when there was no land in sight, and the sky was clouded over." "A navigation tool," Sarah said. "Yes. Back then. It belonged to his father before him, and his father's mother before that. It was already old when my grandfather had it." He turned it over. The back was smooth brass, worn to a soft shine. He was on a boat when the coastal die-off started, when the water began going wrong. He made it back to land, got his family out, got onto a colony transport. The compass was the last thing he picked up before he walked off the boat for the last time. Rael looked at the needle, which was spinning its slow, useless circles. He didn't carry it after that because it was useful. He carried it because it was the last thing that had touched that boat, that ocean. The plateau was very quiet. Lyra had stopped moving entirely. Sarah was looking at the compass with an expression Rael could not fully read, but something in the angle of her head and the stillness of her frills suggested she was doing the Vithian equivalent of having the air knocked out of her. "It is a mourning object," she said. "We don't call it that." "What do you call it?" Rael thought about it. "We call it keeping something. You keep things that mattered. It doesn't have to have a word." Sarah was still for a long moment. Then she said something in Vithian to Lyra, short, firm, and carrying a weight that Lyra clearly understood immediately. Lyra stood and went back into the cave without arguing, which told Rael more about what had just been said than any translation could. Sarah looked at him. In Vithian tradition, objects carry the intention of those who have used them. When we take an object from another, we are reading that intention. We hold it, and we feel what it was meant for. "And what did you feel?" Rael asked. She did not answer for a long time. Then, loss, and something that was not grief, but was near it. And direction, the feeling of going somewhere that was not a place. Rael nodded. "That's about right. I thought it was a weapon," she said. "I thought the direction I felt was targeting. A thing that reaches toward something to strike it. It reaches toward magnetic north," Rael said. "When it can. Right now it can't, because your plateau scrambles the field. So it just spins." Sarah looked at the compass in his palm. Then she said, very quietly, "I should not have taken it." Before Rael could answer, Lyra's voice came from inside the cave, urgent and low. Sarah was on her feet in a single motion. She went inside and there was a rapid exchange in Vithian, Lyra's voice rising with the shape of bad news and Sarah's voice going flat and controlled in the way that meant something had just become significantly worse. Sara came back out. The Conclave has declared your crash a military incursion. Elder Neth has called for a formal response. What kind of response? He is assembling a strike fleet. Rael felt Dovin go tense on his wrist, not literally, but there was a microsecond pause before Dovin spoke that meant the AI had just received and processed something difficult. Rael, I am picking up a partial relay signal. Admiral Finwald's fleet has begun moving toward the Reach. They detected our crash. They have not heard from us. 2 fleets, moving toward each other, with 1 crashed ship and 1 stolen compass and 1 unplanned conversation between a human and a dragon sitting somewhere in the middle. How long before they're in range of each other? Rael asked. At current speed, approximately 30 hours, Dovin said. Rael looked at the compass. In his palm, on this stone, at this altitude of the plateau, the needle was still spinning. He watched it go around and around, indifferent and lost, and thought about his grandfather standing at the door of a boat he would never go back to. You said objects carry intention, he said to Sara. Yes. Then hold it again. He held it out to her. Tell me what you feel now. She hesitated. Then she took it. She closed her iron gray claws around it gently and went still. Her eyes half closed. Whatever the Vithian equivalent of listening was, she was doing it. Then she opened her eyes and looked at him. The same loss, she said. And something new. Urgency. Going towards something very fast. And underneath that, she paused. Stubbornness. Deep stubbornness. Like a stone that has decided to remain where it is regardless of what the water does. That's new, Dovin observed. That's me, Rael said. Sara held the compass out to him. He took it. The needle spun 3 times, and then, for just a moment, for one strange, unexplainable second on a plateau that made compasses useless, it stopped. It was pointing west, toward the Conclave Hall at the edge of the plateau. Then it started spinning again. Sara had seen it. Her eyes were fixed on the small brass disc with an expression Rael could not name, but it had something in it that looked almost like the beginning of a decision. We have 30 hours, she said. 29 now, Dovin said. What do you want to do? Rael asked her. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, I want to stop a war that nobody planned. She said it the way someone says a thing they have already decided before they spoke it. Can you walk for 4 hours? I can walk for a lot more than that. Then get up, she said. We are going to do something extremely unwise. She walked west. He followed. The compass, back in his pocket, spun freely and said nothing, as it always did. But it had pointed for 1 second. And on Veldora, that was more than it had any right to do. The Conclave Hall had been built a long time ago by people who understood that architecture was a kind of argument. It sat at the western lip of Veldora where the plateau ended in a sheer drop, and on a clear day you could see 3 of the other 5 worlds of the Reach from its highest window, small and far, and belonging to the Conclave the way everything in the Reach was supposed to belong to the Conclave. The hall was carved from the natural black rock of the cliff edge, not built on top of it, but opened out of it, as if someone had found the building already inside the stone and simply removed what was unnecessary. The entrance was a gap in the rock that was large enough for a Vithian elder in full neck frill to pass through comfortably, which meant it was extraordinarily large, which was the point. Rael walked through it and felt small in an architectural rather than personal way. He had spent enough time in impressive spaces to recognize when a space was trying to tell him something about himself. He noted the message and filed it, and kept walking. Sara walked beside him, not behind and not in front. This was, Dovin had quietly informed him, significant. Escorting a prisoner meant walking behind. Walking alongside was a different statement entirely. Rael was not sure Sara had made that choice consciously, but he did not mention it. The journey had taken 3.5 hours. They had not spoken much, but the silence had been a working one rather than a hostile one. Rael had asked, once, why humans made the Conclave nervous. Sara had taken a long time to answer. Every civilization we have encountered in the Reach, she said eventually, expanded for one of 2 reasons. They needed more space, or they wanted more power. Both of those we understand. Both of those have limits. When something needs space, you can negotiate about space. When something wants power, you can fight about power. There is an end to both. And us? Rael had asked. She made a sound that was not quite a word. You expand because you're curious, because you find things interesting, because someone, somewhere, asked a question and then built a ship to go look for the answer. She looked at the horizon. There is no end to that. Curiosity does not run out of reasons. It does not get tired. It does not reach a point where it has enough and stops. She paused. That is the most frightening thing we have ever encountered. Rail had thought about that for a while. Then he said, we frightened ourselves with it too, for a long time. What changed? We got better at asking whether we should before we asked whether we could. He shrugged. Not always. Not everywhere. But more than we used to. Sarah had not answered that. But she had not walked faster either. Now they were in the hall, and the conclave hall had noticed them. There were 7 elders present. They were ranged along a natural shelf of rock that formed a rough crescent at the far end of the chamber, and they were all looking at Sarah and the thing she had brought in with her. Elder Neth sat at the center. He was older than the others in a way that was visible not in frailty, but in density. His scales had gone from whatever color they had started as to a dark, close gray, layered and thick, and his eyes were the amber of old stone. He was very still. Sarah, he said. His voice was low and even and had the quality of something that did not need to be loud to fill a space. Elder, she said. She stopped at the correct distance. Rail stopped beside her. Neth looked at Rail for a long time. The way someone looks at something when they are not deciding what it is, but confirming what they already decided it was. A human, he said. On Veldora. Beside a wreckage that your patrol informs me contains survey equipment. Survey equipment that is now destroyed, Sarah said. His ship went down in the wind layer. He was not here by intention. That is what they will say, Neth said. He was not speaking to Sarah. He was speaking to the other elders, and more than that, to the idea in the room. That is the first thing a scout says when it is found. That it was lost. That it was not watching. That it was only curious. Rail decided that silence was not going to help him here. I'm a geological surveyor, he said. His trade standard was careful and direct. My assignment was the Harak Belt, which is outside Veldora's boundary by a significant margin. The wind layer over the plateau is not well charted. That is my fault for not accounting for it more carefully. Neth looked at him. You speak. Yes. You walked here from the crash site. Sarah brought me, Rail said, which I think is relevant, because it was her choice and I would like the record to reflect that she is trying to give you a way out of a situation that is heading somewhere no one in this room actually wants. There was a silence in the chamber that had a specific texture. It was the silence of several very large, very old things reassessing. Sarah said, quietly, there are 2 fleets moving toward each other. Ours and theirs. I brought him here rather than to a holding cell because a holding cell produces a war. This conversation might not. Neth looked at her with an expression that Rail could not read, but Sarah clearly could, because her frills went flat. Show me the device, Neth said. Sarah looked at Rail. He took the compass out of his jacket and held it up. Neth looked at it. He looked at the needle, which was spinning its slow circles, unhurried and unmoved by the situation. He looked at the brass casing, the worn edges, the glass face. He leaned forward slightly. This is the locating device, he said. This is what it transmits to. It doesn't transmit anything, Rail said. It has no electronics. It is a sealed mechanical instrument. It uses a magnetized needle to align with a planetary magnetic field. It cannot communicate. It cannot record. It is a direction-finding tool for a planet it doesn't work on. Neth leaned back. That is a detailed explanation. It is the true one. It is the explanation a spy would prepare, Neth said, for the moment his device was found. Rail looked at him. He understood, in that moment, that Neth was not stupid. Neth was afraid, and what fear did to intelligence was not reduce it, but redirect it, sharpen it entirely toward the task of confirming what the fear already believed. Every piece of information Rail offered would be processed through that lens and come out the same shape. Elder Neth, he said carefully, with respect, you have decided what I am. I cannot say anything that will change that decision today. So let me ask you something instead. He held up the compass. What would a spy use a device like this for, on a planet where it doesn't function? Neth said, misdirection. I see, Rail said. He put the compass back in his jacket. He looked at Sarah, who had the expression of someone watching something they expected happen exactly as they expected it. Neth said, He will be held as material proof of human military intent on sacred ground. This will be presented to the human fleet as the precondition for any further discussion. Sara said, that will not de-escalate. I did not say it would, Neth said. I said it was what will happen. Rail was placed in a stone chamber off the main hall. It was not cruel. There was air, and the stone was not cold the way it would have been on a lower altitude, and a Vithian guard left a container of water without being asked. The door was a heavy slab that clicked shut with the permanence of things that were meant to stay shut. Rail sat against the wall and let Dovin run the numbers quietly. The fleet timing has not changed significantly, Dovin said. 21 hours until they are in effective range of each other. Can you reach Finwald? Lura gave me a relay code before we entered the hall. Dovin paused. I think she did it deliberately. I think she expected this outcome. Rail nodded. Tell Finwald to hold position. Tell her we are alive and that I need 18 hours. She will want more than that. She'll give me 12, Rail said. Tell her 12. I'll work in 12. Dovin sent the signal. In the quiet of the stone chamber, Rail took the compass out again and held it in the dark. He could not see the needle, but he could feel the slight weight of it, the familiar warmth of the brass. He thought about what Sara had said. Curiosity has no end, no limit, no point where it decides it has enough. He thought about Neth's face, closed and certain and old with the work of guarding something. He thought about the second when the compass needle had pointed west, for no reason that physics could explain, at the Conclave Hall. He was not a superstitious man. He believed in magnetic fields and tectonic variants and the documented properties of magnetized metal. He did not believe compasses had intentions. But he thought, 12 hours. And the compass was in his hand, and the wall in front of him had a door in it. He could work with that. The stone chamber was not designed to be cruel, but it was designed to be final, which was almost the same thing. Rail had been in smaller spaces. He had done a solo survey of a collapsed lava tube on Meridian 7 once, for days with a headlamp and a hand drill, and a ceiling 2 feet above his face the entire time. He had an ease with enclosed spaces that he attributed to either good nerves or poor imagination, and had long since stopped trying to determine which. He found a comfortable position against the wall and waited. And while he waited, he talked quietly to Dovin about nothing important. What the rock composition of the chamber walls looked like, whether the water container was ceramic or a mineral compound, whether the guard outside was one of the larger Vithian forms or one of the mid-range ones based on the sound of the footsteps. It was not anxiety. It was the habit of a man who had learned that paying attention was the only thing that consistently helped in situations where nothing else could be done yet. For hours into the quiet, the door moved. Not the full weight of it, just the seam, enough to pass something through. A small folded piece of what might have been paper, if paper were made of compressed mineral fiber, which on Veldora it apparently was. Rail picked it up. The writing was in trade standard, in a careful, slightly formal hand. Lura. He recognized the style from the survey papers she had been holding when she first saw him at the cave. It said, she is outside the east wall. There is a ventilation gap at shoulder height. I mapped it this morning. She does not know I mapped it. She does not know I passed you this note. You did not receive this note. Rail folded it and pressed it into a crack in the stone floor. He moved to the east wall and found the gap. It was narrow, designed for airflow and not passage, but wide enough for his hand if he kept his fingers flat. He pressed his palm to it. The stone on the other side was warm. Rail? Sara's voice came through quietly. No echo in the gap. She was close to the wall. Here, he said. A silence. He had the feeling she had come to say something she had planned and was now finding the plan inadequate. He waited. I should have been clearer with Neth, she said, about what you are, what you were carrying. She paused. He would not have listened. But I should have been clearer. You were clear, Rail said. He was decided. Yes. Another pause. I want to give you the compass. Rail looked at the gap. The brass disc would fit. He could hear in her voice that she had already figured that out. You don't need to do it through the wall, he said. You can come in. I cannot open that door without the guard knowing. Then why do you want to give it to me through the wall? The pause this time was longer. Because I took it, and I should not have. And returning it through a wall at least means I am returning it, even if the circumstances are not. She stopped. Sara, he said. What? I know you took it because you thought it was dangerous. I know you figured out it wasn't. I know you tried to stop Neth from doing what he did, and he overruled you in front of 7 elders, which I suspect costs something to have done to you. He paused. You don't need to pass it through a wall. Keep it until tomorrow. I'll ask for it back in person. The silence this time had a different quality. You intend to go before the full conclave, she said. Not just Neth. I intend to ask you to take me before the full conclave, Rael said. Which is different. It's your decision. Why? Because Neth doesn't speak for all 14 elders. And 14 elders have 14 opinions. If I can say one honest thing to enough of them, there is a chance. He stopped. It's not a good chance. But I have 12 hours before Finwald runs out of patience. And standing in this room is the only option that definitely doesn't work. There was a long quiet. He could hear the plateau wind outside, high and thin, the same wind that had pulled his ship apart. He thought about what Sarah had said the day before about human curiosity. No end, no limit, no point where it decides it has enough. He thought she had not been wrong about that. He just did not think it was as frightening as she did. He thought it was the thing that, done right, found the ventilation gap in the wall and the relay signal through a young scholar's courage and the 12 hours that a fleet admiral with a short fuse would reluctantly grant. Curiosity, done right, looked like this. Like paying attention until you understood enough to try something. Take your compass, Sarah said. Through the wall. Keep it, Rael said. You said you can read intention through objects. So read this. I'm going to walk out of here tomorrow and say something honest to a room full of dragons, and the compass is going to be in my pocket when I do it. And it is going to be there because you gave it back. He paused. That matters. The intention of it matters. You'll feel it. Another long silence. Then, slowly, you are a very strange creature, Rael Dern. I've been told, he said. I will petition for a full conclave audience in the morning, she said. I cannot guarantee they will grant it. Neth will oppose it. But the others? There are 3 elders who have been quietly interested in the human expansion question for some time. They will see this as an opportunity. She paused. Lura will handle the petition framing. She is better at it than I am. Tell her I said thank you. She does not know I am here. She knows, Rael said. She mapped the ventilation gap this morning. She is very good at this. A pause. Then something happened at the wall that sounded, faintly and improbably, like a low exhale of amusement. She is going to be insufferable about this for years, Sarah said. She should be, Rael said. She earned it. He heard movement. She was leaving. Then she stopped. Rael? Yes. In your tradition, she said, what does it mean when an object begins to function somewhere it should not function? He thought about the compass. The single second of stillness on the plateau, and again in the cave, the needle swinging west toward the conclave hall. We usually call it a coincidence, he said. And if it happens more than once. He was quiet for a moment. We call it a coincidence that we decide to pay attention to, he said. Because the other option is ignoring it, and that has never worked out well for us. He heard her walk away. The warmth on the east wall faded slowly, back to stone temperature. He went back to his position against the opposite wall and took a breath. 12 hours. A full conclave audience, maybe. 14 elders, including one who had already made up his mind and would not be unmade by argument. He thought about the compass, about what he wanted to say tomorrow and how to say it plainly, without theater, without making himself sound more important than he was. Just a man who crashed on a sacred plateau and got into a conversation with a dragon who stole something he was glad she had, because it led them both to where they were. He thought about his grandfather. He thought, direction is a habit, not a guarantee. In the morning, the door opened. Lura was outside it, holding a petition document, looking like she had not slept and was very pleased about everything. The guard was gone. Sarah stood behind her, holding the compass. She held it out. This time in the open, not through a wall. He took it. In his hand, in the enclosed corridor of the conclave hall, the needle swung once and settled. Not north. There was no north here that the instrument could find. But it settled. It pointed at the far end of the corridor, where a set of large stone doors led to the main chamber. He looked at it. He looked at Sarah. Don't say coincidence, she said. He put the compass in his pocket. Let's go, he said. 14 was a large number of Vithian elders to have looking at you at once. The main conclave chamber was wider than the outer hall and lower in the ceiling, which meant the space felt full in a way that pressed slightly on the chest, even before you noticed the 14 sets of eyes arranged along the curved stone shelf. Each elder was different coloring, different scale density, different age read in the depth of their plates and the stillness of their frills. But they were all doing the same thing. They were deciding what Rael was, and they were doing it before he said a single word. He had spent some time in the corridor outside thinking about how to walk in. He had decided to just walk in. The only version of entering a room full of apex predators that he could perform without it becoming a performance was the honest one. He walked in. He stopped at what felt like the right distance. He did not bow, because he did not know Vithian bow protocol, and attempting it incorrectly would be worse than not attempting it. He stood straight without being rigid, the way you stood when you were not trying to be impressive, but were not trying to be small either. Elder Neth sat at the center of the shelf, exactly where he had been before. He was looking at Rael with the patience of someone who had already decided how this ended and was simply waiting for the event to catch up to the decision. Sara stood to Rael's left, slightly behind him. Lura was at the edge of the room near the entrance, holding her petition document and doing an excellent job of looking like she was simply there to provide administrative support and was not personally invested in any of this. One of the other elders, a female whose scales had gone a deep bronze with age, said, "The human requested to address the full conclave. He was given accommodation, and instead of accepting it, he has sought to escalate his presence," Neth said. "I would not call that a request. I would call it a tactic." "I would call it both," Rael said. Neth looked at him. "It is a tactic," Rael said, "and it is also a request. Those things can both be true." He paused. "You already know what I am going to say in the broad sense. You know I am going to tell you the compass is not a weapon, and my ship was not a scout, and human expansion into the Reach is not a military program. You know I am going to say all of that. And you have decided in advance that any human saying those things has been prepared to say them." He looked at Neth directly. "So I am not going to say those things." The chamber was quiet in the particular way of a large space where many very large things have just decided to pay attention. "My grandfather was a sailor," Rael said, "on a planet called Earth, on an ocean called the Pacific. He used a compass to know which way he was heading when there was no land in sight. He used the compass I have in my pocket right now. He carried it for decades, and then his children carried it, and then their children carried it, because the ocean it came from doesn't exist the same way anymore. We damaged our world. We had to leave it. That's not a proud part of our history. We know what it is." He paused. He was not performing the pause. He was thinking about how to say the next part correctly. "We went out to the stars because we needed somewhere to go, at first. But that was a long time ago. Now we go because we find things interesting. Your plateau is interesting. The magnetic interference here is unlike anything I have personally surveyed, and I have been doing this for 11 years. Your conclave is interesting. The way you read objects, the way you use architecture as argument, the way Veldora's wind layer behaves in the upper atmosphere. All of it is interesting. That is why humans are in the Reach. Not to take it, not to win it. Because we keep asking questions and then going to look for the answers, and that is a hard habit to stop once you start." He heard Dovin, very quietly on his wrist. "Funwald confirms she is holding. She has 8 hours left on her patience, Rael." He did not react to it visibly. "You are afraid," he said to the room. Not to Neth specifically. To all 14 of them. "You have encountered civilizations that expanded by need and by force, and both of those you understood how to handle. You do not know how to handle something that expands because it is curious. Because curiosity does not stop. Because there is no point at which we will look at the Reach and say, 'We have looked at enough. We are no longer interested.'" He held the compass up. "But curiosity is not conquest. It is not a fleet. It is a man with a broken instrument who followed a set of tracks across a sacred plateau because the thing he was looking for was at the end of them." He looked at the compass. The needle was spinning. "I am not here because I am a soldier. I am not here because I was sent. I am here because my ship went down and one of yours picked up something of mine, and I thought it was worth following." Elder Neth said, "And the fleet that is moving toward the Reach as we speak?" Rael said, "Because you have one of ours. That is the other thing about us. We come back for our people. Always. It is not a threat. It is just a fact about what we do." He paused. "If you release me and open a formal conversation about Veldora's survey status, Funwald will hold. She is not looking for a war. She is looking for me. Neth was quiet. The Bronze Elder said, "You said you are not going to tell us the compass is not a weapon." "I'm not," Rael said. "You know what it is. You have already heard from Sarah what it is. I am telling you what I am, what we are. You can decide whether that is something you want to talk to or something you want to fight." He lowered the compass. "What is it pointing at right now?" He had not planned to ask that. It came out of the part of him that had stopped being strategic and was simply paying attention. He looked at the disk. The needle, which had been spinning since he entered the chamber, was still. It had stopped without him noticing. It was pointing, steadily, at Elder Neth. Not northwest or approximately in his direction. At him. The way a needle points when there is a pole in the ground and nothing else. He looked at Neth. 14 Vithian elders looked at the compass. "You," Rael said. The words sat in the chamber. Then Elder Neth made a sound. It was not a threat sound. It was not a command sound. It was deep and rhythmic, and it rolled through the chamber and bounced off the black stone walls and came back as something that filled the chest. Rael had never heard a Vithian laugh before. He understood now that he was hearing one. It sounded like boulders discovering they could agree on something. When it stopped, Neth was looking at him with an expression that had not been there before. Not warmth, nothing that simple, but something that was adjacent to respect in the way that a cliff face is adjacent to a mountain. Part of the same structure. "Sarah," Neth said. "Elder. This human will remain as a guest rather than a prisoner for the duration of preliminary negotiations." He said it as if he had decided it slightly before the laugh and was simply waiting for the right moment to say it. "Admiral Finwald's fleet is to be notified." He looked at Rael. "You will explain to your admiral that the Conclave does not view this as a resolution. It is a beginning of a conversation. Nothing more." "That's enough," Rael said. The sun on Veldora came through the chamber's high windows in long-angled bars, the way light comes through windows that were designed to make it look significant. In the light, the 14 elders' scales caught different colors: bronze, dark blue, silver, old gray. And for a moment the chamber looked like what it actually was, very old, and full of people who had been trying to get something right for a very long time and were not always sure they were managing it. The formal talks took 2 days. Rael was not involved in the talks themselves. He was a surveyor, not a diplomat, and Finwald sent her actual diplomat the moment the channel opened, a steady-voiced woman named Oregon who had done this 11 times on 11 worlds and had the patience of geological time. Rael sat in a room nearby and answered questions when asked and ate Vithian food cautiously and told Lyra everything she wanted to know about Earth and colony worlds and the Pacific and everything in between. On the morning he left, Sarah walked with him to the landing field where the rescue shuttle was waiting. The plateau was bright and cold, and the silver-barked trees caught the light the way they had when he first saw them, standing in the wreckage of his ship, 3 days and several significant conversations ago. At the edge of the field, she stopped. "The survey agreement covers the eastern section of Veldora," she said. "Not this section. Not where you came down." "I know," Rael said. "The eastern section is interesting too. Different rock formation, different magnetic profile." He paused. "I'll be back when the terms allow." She said nothing for a moment. Then, was the compass pointing at Neth? He took it out, held it level, the way you hold something when you want to be honest with it. The needle spun and spun, useless and free, pointing at nothing and everything. "I don't know," he said. "I think it stopped. I think it was pointing his direction. I'm not sure those two things are the same as what it looked like." "What did it look like?" "It looked like it knew something," he said. "Which compasses don't. They follow fields. They're just instruments." Sarah looked at the brass disc. "My tradition says objects carry the intention of those who have used them. Generations of your family have used that. The intention of all of them is in it." Rael closed his hand around it. "What would all of them have intended?" "Going somewhere," she said, "and coming back." He looked at her. She was not a sentimental creature. Nothing in her bearing or her history suggested she was. But she was a creature who read objects and believed what she read, and she was telling him that she believed the compass meant what she said it meant. He put it in his pocket. "Thank you for giving it back," he said. "Thank you for following it," she said. He walked across the field and boarded the shuttle. Through the small viewport, he could see Sarah watching, and beside her Lyra, who was very studiously not waving in a way that suggested she very much wanted to wave. He thought about 14 elders and one laugh that had sounded like boulders, and a needle that had stopped spinning for 30 seconds in a room where it had no business stopping. Direction is a habit, he thought. Not a guarantee. But sometimes the habit takes you exactly where you needed to go. The shuttle lifted. The plateau fell away below him. Pale stone and silver trees, and the conclave hall at the western edge where the cliff dropped into open air. It got smaller. Then it was part of a larger view. The plateau, and the 6 worlds of the Reach, and the space beyond them where Finwald's fleet was already standing down. The compass was in his pocket, warm from his hand. He did not take it out. He did not need to check it. He already knew which way he was going.